I don't need your legacy knowledge, the 25-year-old manager said, shredding my contract. Okay, I said. I texted one word, execute. The lights flickered. The factory silence was deafening. The manager's phone rang. It was the CEO. Why did the production line just cost us $50,000 in 10 seconds? But before the lights went out, before the silence cost more than a luxury sedan every minute, and before I became the villain in their corporate slide deck, there was the noise. You know that sound when a car engine creates a low rhythmic thrum, just before a piston decides to violently exit the block. That is the sound of my life at Gracine Industries. Most people hear noise. I hear a symphony of impending disaster that only I know how to conduct. My name is William. I am 58 years old. I have a spine curved slightly to the left from 30 years of leaning over conveyor relays. I possess the kind of legacy knowledge that corporate headhunters call invaluable, right before they try to lowball you on a severance package. It was a Tuesday. Tuesdays in a Michigan stamping plant smell like ozone and burnt hydraulic fluid. It is a perfume you cannot buy in a department store, and frankly, it smells better than the desperation radiating off the new management team. I was standing at Station 4 on Line 3. Line 3 is my problem child. He is a 20-year-old KUKA robotics assembly that likes to drift out of sync if the humidity in the plant drops below 40%. I do not look at a dashboard to know this. I feel it in the floorboards. The vibration changes from a waltz to a stumble. I was tightening a sensor bracket a quarter turn, not a millimeter more, or the optical reader throws a fit when I felt a presence. You know the type. It was not the heavy plodding tread of a shift worker in steel toes. It was the frantic clicking tap dance of expensive Italian loafers that have never touched anything grittier than a plush conference room carpet. I did not turn around. You are standing in the yellow zone, I said to the air. Unless you are rated for high voltage maintenance, you are about 3 inches from voiding your life insurance policy. William, right? The legacy specialist. I turned then. It was Troy, our new operations director. He looked like he was freshly hatched from an MBA incubator, with smooth skin, teeth that were suspiciously white, and a suit that cost more than my first car. He was holding a tablet like it was a holy relic, and he was looking at my grease-stained coveralls with a mixture of amusement and mild disgust. He looked like the kind of guy who calls a hard day of work a 90-minute video call where the internet connection lagged. System specialist, I corrected, wiping a smudge of lithium grease onto a rag that had seen better decades. And you must be the new optimization guru corporate sent down to explain to us why we need to do more with less. Troy, he said, offering a hand that looked soft enough to bruise if I gripped it too hard. I did not take it. I just held up my oily wrench. He retracted the hand, wiping it on his pants reflexively. And actually, William, it is Director of Modernization. We are looking to pivot. Pivot is the word of the quarter. Pivot, I repeated. The word tasted like aluminum foil. Is that fancy talk for fixing things that are not broken? He laughed. It was a hollow, dry sound like shaking a box of uncooked pasta. That is the thing about legacy mindsets, William. You see not broken, I see inefficient. I have been reviewing the logs. You spend 40% of your time on manual overrides for Line 3. That is wasted bandwidth. We need automation that automates the automation. I stared at him. I wanted to explain that Line 3 was not just a machine. It was a collection of quirks and patches that had evolved over 2 decades. I wanted to explain that the manual overrides were me financing a firmware conflict that the original manufacturer stopped supporting, when the president was a different man entirely. But I knew he would not hear me. He was listening to the podcast in his head, where he is the hero who saves the quarterly earnings report. We have a meeting in 20 minutes, Troy said, tapping his tablet. All senior staff. I am unveiling the roadmap. I think you will find it illuminating. I will be there, I said, as soon as I convince Line 3 not to eat the next pallet of sheet metal. He walked away, stepping delicately over a coil of pneumatic hose like it was a viper. I watched him go, and my gut tightened. It was not the usual stress of the job, the looming deadlines, or the parts shortages. It was something colder. It was the feeling you get when you see a storm front rolling in over the lake, gray, heavy, and inevitable. I finished the adjustment on the sensor. The line hummed back into a perfect rhythm. Thrum, click. Whoosh, it was music. I patted the safety cage. "Do not worry," I whispered. "I won't let the shiny man hurt you." But as I walked toward the conference room, wiping my hands with aggressive force, I could not shake the feeling. I stopped by my locker. Inside, hidden behind a stack of manuals for a logic system that went obsolete in 2012, was a small, unassuming USB drive. I do not know why I kept it there. Maybe paranoia, maybe intuition. It was a backup of a backup, a ghost image of the entire plant architecture that I had compiled over years. It contained every patch, every line of spaghetti code that held this rust bucket together. I looked at it. Then, for the first time in 5 years, I took it out of the locker and slipped it into my pocket. It felt heavy, like a loaded gun. The conference room was air-conditioned to a frigid 68 degrees. The rest of the old guard was there. Miguel from maintenance, Sarah from quality control, and Dave, the floor foreman. They all looked tired. They looked like people who knew the axe was swinging but did not know whose neck was on the block. Troy stood at the head of the table. Behind him, a presentation glowed with words like synergy, holistic, and right-sizing. "Welcome, team," Troy beamed. He did not sit, he paced. "I have spent the last 2 weeks observing, and I have to be honest. I am shocked. Shocked at the reliance on tribal knowledge." He said tribal knowledge the way you would say sewage leak. "We have critical dependencies on single individuals," he continued, his eyes sliding over to me. "If William here gets hit by a bus, line 3 stops. If Miguel wins the lottery, the climate control dies. This is unacceptable risk. We are moving to a fully standardized cloud-based system. No more manual patches, no more magic touch. We are digitizing the floor." Miguel raised a hand. His knuckles were scarred and thick. "Sir, with all due respect, the cloud does not know that the hydraulic seals on press 4 expand differently in January than they do in July. The sensors do not catch that, we do." Troy smiled. It was a smile that did not reach his eyes. "That is exactly the problem, Miguel. You are relying on feel. We need data and we are going to get it. Starting today, we are auditing all contracts. We are looking for redundancies." The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed. I sat perfectly still, hand in my pocket, fingers brushing against the cool plastic of the USB drive. "William," Troy said, and the room seemed to shrink. "Since your role is primarily maintenance of legacy systems, and since we are eliminating those legacy systems, human resources will be setting up a meeting with you later today to discuss your transition." "Transition," I said flatly. "It is a standard review," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Just paperwork. But we need to look at the budget. You are an expensive luxury, William. In the modern age, we do not need artisans. We need operators." I did not blink. I did not scream. I did not throw my chair through the window, even though the urge was strong enough to taste like copper in my mouth. I just nodded slowly. "Understood," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. Even I was surprised by it. "Great." Troy clapped his hands. "Out with the old, in with the new." Meeting adjourned. As the team filed out, Miguel squeezed my shoulder. He looked like he wanted to punch something. "William, this is garbage," he muttered. "It is okay, Miguel," I said, and a small, razor-sharp smile touched my lips. "He wants to modernize. He wants to see what the factory looks like without the tribal knowledge. I think we should let him." I walked out of that room with my head high. I went back to my desk, a cluttered corner of the engineering bay, piled high with schematics and old coffee cups. I sat down at my terminal. Troy thought he was firing an employee. He did not realize he was pulling the control rods out of a nuclear reactor. I brought up the command console. My fingers flew across the keyboard, muscle memory from 30 years of typing in the dark, copying files, encrypting, status complete. I wasn't stealing anything. I was just packing up my personal belongings. If those belongings happen to include the only functional map of the system logic gates, well, that is just intellectual property, is it not? I leaned back in my chair. The factory floor rumbled beneath me. It sounded different now. It sounded like a beast holding its breath. "Okay, Troy," I whispered to the screen. "You want to drive? Here are the keys. Hope you know how to drive a stick." The Human Resources office always smelled like vanilla air freshener. It was a sweet, cloying scent designed to mask the odor of crushed dreams. At Gracine Industries, the HR department was located in the Clean Tower, the administrative wing that was physically attached to the factory but spiritually located on a different planet. The carpet was gray, the walls were beige, and the people were dead behind the eyes. I sat in a chair that was designed to be uncomfortable, presumably to make you want to sign whatever severance agreement they shoved in front of you just so you could leave. Across from me sat Troy and a woman named Jessica from HR. Jessica looked like she was 12 years old and terrified. Troy looked like he was about to win a game of Monopoly. So William, Troy began, leaning back and tenting his fingers. As we discussed earlier, the pivot to Digital 4.0 renders your specific skill set obsolete. It is not personal. It is evolution. You are like a carburetor in a world of fuel injection. He paused, waiting for me to be impressed by his metaphor. I see, I said, so 32 years of keeping this plant running with 99.8% uptime is a carburetor. Exactly. He pointed a finger at me like I had just won a prize. You get it. We need to streamline your contract, which frankly is bloated with seniority bonuses. It is a weight we cannot carry if we want to be agile. Jessica pushed a piece of paper across the desk. This is a separation agreement, William. It offers 2 weeks of severance for every 5 years of service, contingent on a non-disparagement clause and a full handover of all company assets. I picked up the paper. The numbers were insulting. It was enough to buy a used Honda. Maybe not enough to cover the hip surgery I would eventually need from walking on concrete floors since the Reagan administration. And the handover? I asked, looking at Troy. You want me to train the new guys? Show them where the bodies are buried? Troy laughed again. That dry, rattling laugh. William, please. We have the documentation. We have the schematics. We do not need lore. We have the cloud. The new team starts Monday. They are certified on the new system. They do not need you hovering over their shoulders, telling them how you used to fix things with duct tape and prayers. He stood up, walked over to a shredder in the corner, and picked up a folder labeled contract renewal. He held it up for me to see. This was the proposal for your extension, he said. Digitization, William. It is cleaner. He fed the folder into the shredder. The machine whirred, eating the paper with a satisfying crunch. He smiled at me through the noise. It was theatrical. It was cruel. It was necessary. If he had not done that, if he had shown even an ounce of respect, I might have warned him. I might have told him about the thermal runaway on press 6. I might have mentioned that the cooling pumps on the roof need to be rebooted manually after a thunderstorm. But as I watched my future turn into confetti, the last shred of loyalty I had for Grayson Industries vanished. Okay, I said. I signed the separation agreement. I did not read the fine print. I did not care. Badge. Please, Jessica whispered. I unclipped my identification badge. The photo was from 20 years ago. I looked younger, less tired. I placed it on the desk. And any company data, Troy added. Laptops, drives, keys. I reached into my bag. I pulled out my company phone and my heavy ring of keys. Keys to the server room, the electrical cages, the maintenance lifts. I laid them down with a clatter. That is everything, I lied. The USB drive in my pocket felt warm against my leg. Excellent, Troy said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. Security will escort you out, standard procedure. Do not take it personally. I never do, I said. I stood up. My knees popped. I looked Troy dead in the eye. He was tall, but he looked small to me. He looked like a child playing with matches in a fireworks factory. Good luck with the modernization, Troy. The machines have a personality, treat them right. Machines are machines, William, he scoffed. They do what they are coded to do. Yes, I said softly. They certainly do. The walk to the parking lot was the longest walk of my life. A security guard named Kevin, a kid I had known since he was a rookie, walked beside me. He looked miserable. I am sorry, William, he mumbled. This is messed up. Who is going to fix the breaker when it trips in the cafeteria? Troy is an optimizer. Kevin, I said, putting on my sunglasses. I am sure he will optimize the breaker. I got to my truck, a beat-up Ford F-150 that had more rust than paint. I threw my personal box on the passenger seat. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I looked back at the massive gray bulk of the factory. Smoke puffed from the stacks. The hum of the production line vibrated through the asphalt. Goodbye, old girl, I said to the factory. I started the truck. The engine roared to life, drowning out the distant hum of the plant. As I drove away, I did not look in the rearview mirror. I was heading to my sister's place in Traverse City, 300 miles north. I was going to drink wine. I was going to sleep in, and I was going to wait for the inevitable phone call. Because here is the thing about legacy systems. They are the foundation. And when you rip out the foundation to put in a shiny new basement, the whole house tends to lean. I gave it 3 days. Maybe 4. I was wrong. It only took 2. Wednesday morning found me sitting on a wooden porch overlooking the Grand Traverse Bay. The water was a piercing, icy blue. Seagulls cried overhead. It was idyllic. It was peaceful. It was hell. I could not relax. My body was still running on factory time. At 6 in the morning, my internal clock screamed that I should be checking the pressure gauges on the hydraulic loops. At 7, I felt the phantom vibration of the shift change whistle. My sister Martha brought me a cup of tea. She was worried about me. She told me to read a book. She told me to go for a walk. I told her I would. Instead, I opened my personal laptop. Troy's information technology team had revoked my company credentials, sure, but they had not found the backdoor account named Admin Ghost buried in the subdirectory of the legacy lighting control system. Why would they? They were looking for users, not ghosts. I connected to the remote desktop node I had set up years ago for emergency diagnostics. The screen flickered to life. Green text on a black background. System online. User admin ghost. Permissions root. I did not do anything. Not yet. Revenge is a dish best served cold, but industrial sabotage needs to simmer. I just watched the logs scroll by. It started at 10 in the morning. Troy had initiated the cutover. He pushed a button on his shiny tablet that rerouted the logic controls from the local servers, the ones I maintained, to his new cloud-based system. Seamless integration, he had called it. At 10:15, the timing drift started. I saw the numbers change on my screen. It wasn't catastrophic at first, just sluggish. Latency between the cloud server and the physical motors was only 200 milliseconds. To a human, 200 milliseconds is nothing. It is the blink of an eye. It is the time it takes to click a mouse. But in high-speed manufacturing, 200 milliseconds is an eternity. It is the difference between a perfect weld and a pile of scrap metal. It is the difference between a handshake and a slap in the face. I sipped my tea. It was cold. I watched the latency spike to 300 milliseconds. The error logs began to populate. Warning, servo mismatch. Warning, timing drift detected. The waltz was ending. The stumble was beginning. And Troy, the conductor with no rhythm, was about to drop the baton. From my vantage point on the porch, 300 miles away, the disaster began as a string of yellow text. Latency high, sync error, buffer overflow. To the uninitiated, it looked like computer gibberish. To me, it looked like a heart monitor on a patient who was starting to code. I knew exactly what was happening inside the factory. I could close my eyes and see it. Troy had pushed the button to switch the brains of the operation to the cloud, but he had forgotten that light has a speed limit. The signal had to travel from the sensor on the floor, out through the fiber optic line, up to a server farm in Virginia, get processed by his fancy new algorithm, and then travel all the way back to Michigan to tell a motor to stop. That trip took 200 milliseconds. In a video game, 200 milliseconds of lag means you miss your shot. In the stamping plant, on line 3, it meant the robotic arms were welding a memory of where the car frame used to be, not where it actually was. Miguel told me later that the first sign was the sound. The smooth hiss and pop of the welders turned into a stuttering, coughing noise. The arms started to hesitate. They looked confused, like a line of dancers waiting for a beat that never came. They were waiting for instructions from a conductor who was asleep at the podium. Stop the line, Dave the floor foreman had shouted. But Troy, standing on the observation deck, had waved him off. It is just the calibration phase, he had announced over the roar of the floor. The machine learning algorithm is adjusting to the workflow. Let it run. So they let it run. On my screen, the yellow text turned orange. Position error axis 4, torque limit exceeded. At 10:45 in the morning, the robot arm at Station 5 moved to weld a joint. Under my old logic map, the system checked the position of the metal every 4 milliseconds. If the metal was not there, the robot triggered a soft halt. It would pause, hum politely, and wait for a human to check the alignment. It was a safety feature I had coded in 2008 after a near miss with a loose clamp. But Troy had bypassed the soft halt. He wanted speed. He wanted continuous flow. He wanted the efficiency charts to look green. So when the sensor failed to report the position of the car door chassis due to the lag, the robot did not pause. It assumed the door was where it was supposed to be. It swung a high torque welding gun forward at 6 feet per second. The door was not there, but the hydraulic clamp for the next station was. I did not hear the sound, but I felt it. A cold shiver ran down my spine just as a red notification flashed on my laptop: critical failure. Impact detected. Miguel said the crunch was not just a metallic thud. It was a scream of tearing steel that made your teeth ache. The robot arm drove the welder through the clamp, shearing off a titanium bolt the size of a fist and bending the primary axle shaft of the robot itself. Hydraulic fluid is flammable when it is atomized. As the metal sheared, sparks showered down like a cheap 4th of July display. The high-pressure fluid sprayed across the aisle, hitting the hot welding tip. Whoosh! Fire alarm triggered. Zone 3. On my porch, the seagulls were still crying. The water was still blue. But on my screen, the world was burning. Fire on line 3, Miguel had screamed, grabbing an extinguisher. The crew swarmed the machine, battling the small blaze with chemical foam. They were destroying thousands of dollars of raw material to save the structure, spraying white foam over the blackened, twisted metal of the robot arm. Troy stood frozen on the deck. His face was pale. The efficiency boost he had promised corporate had just turned into a catastrophic failure. I watched the error logs pile up. Robot Axis 3 destroyed. Replacement cost $22,000. Hydraulic clamp total loss. Cost $6,000. Downtime estimate 48 hours minimum. I took a sip of my wine. It tasted like vinegar. My hand was shaking. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? I wanted Troy to fail. I wanted him to see that you cannot cheat physics with a buzzword. I wanted him to understand that the legacy systems were not old junk, but scar tissue formed over decades of learning what not to do. But looking at the red text, I did not feel triumphant. I felt sick. That robot arm was not just a machine to me. We called him Lefty. I had replaced his bearings 3 times. I had rewritten his motion profile to be gentler on his gears. I had kept him running when the manufacturer said he was scrap. And now he was broken, twisted into a pretzel, because a man in a suit thought he knew better. And the men, Dave. They were down there breathing smoke and chemical fumes. They were risking their safety to clean up a mess they did not make. I closed the laptop lid. I could not watch it anymore. The silence of the lake felt heavy now. It was not peaceful. It was accusatory. Inside the house, my phone began to ring. It was not the internal line. It was not Miguel. It was a blocked number. But I knew who it was. It was the red phone on the wall of the manager's office. The phone that only rang when the sky was falling. I let it ring. I imagined Troy standing in the smoke-filled office, staring at the phone, praying I would pick up and tell him how to undo the last 30 minutes. I imagined the sweat on his forehead. I imagined the terror of a man realizing that his career was currently melting onto the concrete floor. Let it burn, I whispered to the empty air. But the anger was gone, replaced by a deep, hollow sadness. The factory was hurt. And even though I had the medicine, I was going to let the fever break the patient. Because if I went back now, if I saved him, he would never learn. He would think it was a glitch. He would blame the hardware. He would do it again. No, the lesson had to be expensive. It had to hurt. I walked to the railing and looked out at the water. The wind was picking up, blowing from the north. A storm was coming. I could feel it in my knees. Back in the factory, the clean-up was ending, and the panic was just beginning. Because Troy, in his desperation, was about to make a decision that would turn a $20,000 accident into an extinction-level event. He was about to stop blaming the hardware and start blaming the ghost. And you never, ever try to exorcise a ghost that holds the keys to the front door. The sun had set over Traverse City, turning the bay into a sheet of black glass, but inside the server room at Gracine Industries, it was always high noon. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing frequency, reflecting off the white tile floors and the rows of black server racks. I was not there, of course. I was 300 miles away, eating a sandwich that tasted like sawdust. But I knew that room better than my own kitchen. I knew that the cooling unit in the corner rattled when it kicked into high gear. I knew that the air smelled of ozone and the specific, desperate sweat of men who know they are in over their heads. I watched the drama unfold through a terminal window on my laptop. It was a silent play, told in lines of command text and error messages. Troy had called in his special team. He called them the Clean Squad. They were a group of external contractors, bright kids with computer science degrees and skinny jeans, who knew everything about Python and Java, but couldn't identify a servo motor if it fell on their foot. They were there to scrub the system. They were there to perform an exorcism. I watched their attempts in real time. Command delete user E. Miller. Response error 4003. Access denied. Admin rights required command. Force remove directory legacy safety protocols. Response error. Directory in use by system root. They were trying to delete me. It was almost insulting how bad they were at it. They were trying to pick a lock that I had designed, built, and welded shut 10 years ago. They thought they were fighting a piece of software. They didn't realize they were fighting the immune system of the factory itself. I could imagine Troy pacing behind them. I could see him checking his watch, his expensive Italian loafers clicking on the tiles. He would be sweating now. The accident on line 3 had cost $22,000 in hardware, but the downtime was costing $5,000 a minute. The sheer weight of that number breaks people. It makes them irrational. Why is the line still down? Troy would be screaming. We are locked out, the head of the IT team would stammer. There is a ghost in the machine, sir. A legacy partition that controls the critical timing. We cannot override it without the root password. Hack it, Troy would say. It is just code. Brute force it. If we brute force it, we might corrupt the safety protocols, the kid would warn. The whole system could lock up. I saw the hesitation in the command logs, a pause, a cursor blinking in a dark room. And then, a new command appeared on my screen. Pseudo brute force entry target root. They were trying to break down the door. I sighed and took a bite of my sandwich. Oh, Troy, you sweet summer child. Bypassing safety protocols on a manufacturing line is like taking the brakes off a freight train because they are slowing you down. Sure, you will go faster for a minute, but the stop is going to be spectacular. The system fought back. It was designed to. When the brute force attack hit the kernel, my code interpreted it as a hostile intrusion. It didn't just lock the door, it added deadbolts. Access revoked. Terminal lockout initiated. User credentials suspended. The Clean Squad was now completely locked out of the control loop. They couldn't even log in to apologize. This was the moment I knew it. This was the moment the phone would ring. I checked the time. It was 8:30 in the evening. The CEO, Mr. Henderson, would be at home having dinner, but his phone would buzz. He would see the production dashboard flatline. 0 output, 0 efficiency, and he would make the call. In the server room, the red phone on the wall would be screaming. I imagined Troy picking it up. I imagined the conversation. Henderson was a man who did not understand code, but he understood numbers. He would ask one question, when are we running? And Troy, cornered, desperate, and drowning in his own hubris, would have to lie. He would say it was a glitch. He would say he had a solution. He hung up the phone. I knew he did because the logs on my screen stopped trying to hack the system. There was a long pause. Then, a new voice entered the room. I wasn't there to hear it, but Stan told me later. Stan was a maintenance technician who had been at the plant since the doors opened in the 90s. He was 70 years old, chewed on toothpicks, and had zero patience for fools. He had been watching the IT kids fail for 3 hours. He was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. You do not want to do that, son, Stan had said. Excuse me, Troy snapped. Factory reset, Stan said, reading the intention on Troy's face. You think that means clean slate in this place? Factory default means the settings from 1998. It means DOS prompts. It means the robotic arms forget they have hands. It means you lose the calibration data for every single machine on the floor. I do not care about 1998, Troy yelled. His voice would have been cracking. I have a cloud backup of the current settings. We wipe the legacy partition, we get rid of the ghost, and we reload from the cloud. The cloud backup that failed to sync because of the latency issues. Stan asked dryly. Troy paused. He looked at the server rack. He looked at the blank screens of his IT team. He looked at the future he had promised, which was currently turning into a black hole of liability. He was cornered. A smart man would have stopped. A smart man would have picked up his cell phone, called the one person who could fix it, and begged. I was staring at my phone, waiting for it to light up. I was ready to answer. I would have charged him double sure, but I would have saved him. But Troy was not smart. He was proud, and pride is the most expensive commodity in business. Do it, Troy whispered. Sir, the IT kid asked. Factory reset. Wipe the legacy partition. We rebuild from the ground up today. That will take the whole plant offline, the kid warned. Not just line 3. Everything. The lights, the climate control, the door locks. Do it, Troy screamed. I am in charge here. Burn it down if you have to. Just get her out of the system. On my screen in Traverse City, a new command line appeared. It was the nuclear option, the command that should never be typed. Format C drive system root. Force. This action is irreversible. Proceed. Yes or no. I watched the cursor hover. I held my breath. Why enter? The screens in the control room flickered. Then they went black. The hum of the server fans died down. Out on the floor, the lights buzzed and cut out. The emergency sodium lamps kicked in, bathing the silent factory in a sickly orange glow. The conveyor belts stopped with a lurch. The air compressors whined down with a long, mournful hiss. Silence. Absolute dead silence. Troy smiled in the dark. It is done, he said. Now boot up the new image. The IT kid pressed the power button. The servers whirred. Text scrolled across the screen. Booting loading operating system error. Boot device not found. Error. Hardware abstraction layer missing error. System architect signature required. What? Troy leaned in. What is that? It wiped the operating system, the kid whispered. But the motherboard firmware, the BIOS, it is still looking for her signature. It will not accept the new image because it does not recognize the authority. Bypass it, I can't. It is hardware encoded. She flashed the chips physically. Suddenly, a message popped up on the main screen. It wasn't a system error. It was a text message routed through the emergency notification gateway. I had typed it 10 seconds ago. Message from admin Ghost. Did you just try to format my brain, Troy? That was rude. The message hung on the screen like a neon sign in a graveyard. Troy stared at the text, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. The arrogance that had armored him for the last 48 hours finally cracked, revealing the terrified child beneath. She is watching us, the information technology lead whispered. He looked around the server room as if expecting me to materialize out of the cooling vents. It is in the walls. She is not a ghost, Troy shrieked. His voice broke, high and shrill. She is a hacker. Trace the signal. Call the police. Stan, the old maintenance technician, stood up from his leaning spot against the doorframe. He put on his coat slowly, methodically buttoning it all the way to the chin. She is not hacking, son, Stan said. You just tried to break into a house she built, and you tripped the burglar alarm. I am going home. Call me when you hire an adult. Stan walked out. The heavy steel door clicked shut behind him, a sound that felt like a gavel coming down on a guilty verdict. The rest of the team looked at each other. They were alone in the dark. The factory was dead. The screens were black, save for that one mocking message. And somewhere in Michigan, a 58-year-old woman was probably chuckling. I wasn't chuckling. Actually, I was eating a grape. But the satisfaction was deep and nourishing. I saw the system offline notification on my phone. He had done the unthinkable. He had nuked the site. Now he had nothing. No old system, no new system. Just millions of dollars of silent metal, and a board of directors meeting scheduled for tomorrow. Thursday morning broke over the plant with a gray, unforgiving light. The factory felt like a hospital ward where the patient had flatlined, and the doctors were arguing over the textbook. The silence was the worst part. A stamping plant is never silent. Even on holidays, there is a hum. The transformers buzz, the hydraulic pumps cycle, the ventilation fans breathe. It is a living thing. But now, under the sickly orange glow of the emergency sodium lights, the silence was heavy enough to crush you. It was a lobotomy. Troy had wiped the mind, and the body had forgotten how to function. The robotic arms on line 1 hung limp, their servos disengaged, looking like dead birds. The conveyor belts were still. The massive stamping presses, usually capable of exerting 3,000 tons of force, were just cold blocks of iron. Outside, the chaos was beginning to compound. Delivery trucks were lined up at the loading docks, engines idling, diesel exhaust drifting into the morning air. The drivers were confused because the electronic gates would not open. The just-in-time supply chain, the pride of modern manufacturing, was quickly becoming a not-in-time disaster. I checked the math in my head. Gracine Industries burned roughly $85 every second the line was stopped. It had been 16 hours since the crash. That was nearly $5 million gone, evaporated into the ether of Troy's ego, and the pressure was mounting. I monitored the external feeds. I saw the CEO's limousine pull up to the front gate, only to be stopped because the badge reader was offline. I saw Mr. Henderson get out of the car, his face a mask of fury, and walk through the pedestrian turnstile. Troy must have seen him too, in the darkened server room surrounded by useless screens and exhausted teenagers. Troy snapped. He realized that the software path was dead. He could not code his way out of this. He could not hack his way past my signature. The brain was gone, but the muscles were still there. "We do not need the computer," Troy whispered. It was a manic, desperate whisper. "Sir," the IT kid asked. "The motors, the pumps, they run on electricity, just electricity. We do not need a logic controller to tell a motor to spin. We just need to close the circuit." "Sir, that is dangerous," the kid said. "Without the logic controller, there is no regulation, no speed control, no safety stops." "I do not care about safety stops," Troy yelled. He grabbed a set of schematics from the table, tearing the paper in his haste. "I care about movement. If I can get the main drive belt turning, if I can get the hydraulic pressure up, I can show Henderson that we are operational. I can buy time." He looked at the schematic, his eyes were wide, feverish. "The main power bus," he said, "in the power shed. If we bypass the digital relays and bridge the contactors manually, everything turns on, all at once. That will surge the grid," the kid warned. "It will jump, start the heart," Troy corrected. He threw the schematic down and ran for the door. "Come with me, we are going to hotwire the factory." I sat on my porch, 300 miles away. I did not know what he was saying, but I saw the result on my remote diagnostic tool. A new alert popped up, not from the server, but from the cellular modem connected to the power infrastructure. Alert, power shed door open. Manual override engaged on breaker panel 4. My blood ran cold. Breaker panel 4 controlled the 480-volt main bus. It was the jugular vein of the plant. If he touched that wrong, if he bypassed the phase sequence protection, he wouldn't just break the machines. He would turn the factory into a bomb. I stood up, knocking my chair over. The grape in my hand rolled across the floor. This wasn't a game anymore. I had wanted him to fail. I had wanted him to lose his job. I did not want him to die. I grabbed my phone. I dialed Miguel. "Pick up," I hissed. "Pick up, you stubborn ox." The phone rang. Once, twice. "Hello." Miguel's voice was tight, bordering on panic. "Miguel, get out of there," I shouted. "Where are you?" "I am in the parking lot. I evacuated my guys when the lights went out." "But Elaine, Troy is crazy. He has a crew of contractors, scabs he hired overnight. They are heading to the power shed. They are carrying copper bars, jumpers. He was going to bridge the safety fuses." "Miguel, listen to me closely. If they bridge the main bus without the phase controller, the motors will run backward. The ventilation fans will pull exhaust fumes back into the plant. The hydraulic presses will try to push up instead of down. It will tear the place apart." "I know," Miguel said. "I tried to stop him. He threatened to have me arrested for trespassing. He is in the cage now." "Is the morning shift inside?" I asked. "Some of them. They are in the break room, waiting for the power to come back." My heart hammered against my ribs. The break room was right next to the high-pressure hydraulic reservoir. If the pumps ran backward, the reservoir would overpressurize and burst. "Shrapnel, boiling oil." "I cannot stop him," Miguel said. "He has locked the door from the inside." I said. My hand hovered over my laptop. I couldn't log into the server. Troy had wiped it. But the ghost system, the deep BOS that Stan had mentioned, had one final failsafe. A dead man switch I had programmed years ago in case of a catastrophic cyber attack or a hostile takeover of the controls. It listened for a specific command on the cellular emergency frequency, a command that would trigger a physical lockout of the main breakers. It would blow the fuses. It would destroy $10,000 worth of ceramic and copper in a millisecond. But it would kill the power before Troy could kill the workers. "Miguel, get everyone back. Further back. To the fence line." "What are you going to do?" "I am going to pull the plug," I said. "Permanently." I hung up. I opened my messaging app. I had a contact saved as Gracine Main Bus. I typed the word. One word. No punctuation. No emotion. Execute? I hovered my thumb over the send button. I imagined Troy in the power cage, sweating, screaming at some poor contractor to jam a copper bar into the terminals. I imagined the sparks. I imagined the silence. I pressed send. Sent delivered. 300 miles away inside the dark, cavernous chest of Gracine Industries, a tiny relay clicked. It was a small sound no louder than a dry twig snapping, but it was the trigger for a violent release of energy. Click, then a thunderclap. Boom. It was not the chaotic, shredding noise of an explosion. It was the deep, authoritative bark of 3 massive industrial-grade fuses blowing simultaneously. It was the sound of 10,000 amps of electricity hitting a brick wall. It was the sound of physics enforcing its laws. The lights in the parking lot flickered and died. The hum of the backup generators cut out instantly. The silence that followed was not just quiet. It was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. The factory was stone dead, inert. On my porch in Traverse City, I lowered the phone. I exhaled a breath I did not realize I had been holding. My hands were trembling not from cold, but from the adrenaline of knowing I had just caused $50,000 in damage to save 5 lives. My phone buzzed immediately. It was Mikkel. "William, are you there?" His voice was shaking. "I am here, Miguel," I said. "Is everyone okay?" "Holy Mother of God, William. The whole substation just blew. There is smoke coming from the power shed. It smells like ozone and melted copper. Did the contractors get out?" I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. "Yeah. They came running out like their pants were on fire. They are yelling that the panel exploded. They dropped the copper bars and ran for the gate." "It did not explode," I said. Leaning back in my chair, it tripped. Hard way. The dead man switch shorted the main inputs to ground before the current could reach the bus. "You blew the main fuses," Miguel breathed. "You actually blew them. Troy cannot hotwire a melted fuse, Miguel. Is he okay?" There was a pause on the line. I could hear shouting in the background. "He is stumbling out of the shed now," Miguel said. "He looks like he saw a ghost. His suit is covered in soot. He is coughing. But he is walking." "Good," I said. "I do not want him dead. I just want him stopped." "William," Miguel lowered his voice, "you need to know. The chief executive officer just pulled up. Mr. Henderson, his limousine is at the gate. He is stepping out now. He is looking at the smoke." "Good," I said again. "Tell him I said hello." The line went dead. I put the phone down on the small wooden table. I picked up my glass of wine. I looked out at the bay. The storm I had felt earlier was breaking. Rain began to patter against the roof of the porch, washing away the dust of the day. I had done it. I had pulled the plug. The factory was safe. It was broken, expensive, and completely offline, but it wasn't going to kill anyone. Troy's modernization was officially over. Now came the cleanup, and the cleanup required a janitor who knew where the broom was kept. I went to my closet and pulled out my work boots. I brushed a speck of dust off the toe. "Showtime," I whispered. Back at the plant, the scene was playing out exactly as I had scripted it in my head. I wasn't there, but years later, Miguel would tell me the story over beers, laughing until he cried. The cost of downtime in a Tier 1 automotive supplier is calculated in seconds. Specifically at Gracine, it was roughly $85 per second. When I sent that text, I didn't just blow a fuse. I burned a pile of cash the size of a minivan. By the time the smoke cleared from the power shed, the losses were astronomical. Shipments missed $150,000. Contract penalties $75,000. Blown main fuses and damaged switching gear $50,000. That 50 grand was the cherry on top. It was the direct result of Troy's stupidity meeting my failsafe. Mr. Henderson stood in the parking lot. He was wearing a cashmere coat that cost more than Miguel's truck. He was staring at the blackened door of the power shed. Rain hissed as it hit the hot metal of the substation roof. Troy was standing next to him. He looked like a chimney sweep who had just been caught stealing silver. His face was smeared with carbon, his white shirt ruined. He was shaking, vibrating with the aftershocks of the blast. "Explain," Henderson said. His voice wasn't loud, it was terrifyingly quiet. "It was sabotage," Troy spluttered. He pointed a trembling finger at the darkened factory. "I told you she hacked us. She blew the power remotely. This is domestic terrorism. I want the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Henderson turned to look at Troy. He looked at him with the cold, dispassionate gaze of a man who makes decisions based on return on investment. "Sabotage," Henderson repeated. or a safety lockout. She did it, Troy stammered. I spoke to the fire marshal on my way in. Henderson interrupted. He said the fuses blew because the system detected an illegal phase sequence on the input. He said someone was trying to bypass the safety regulators. He said if those fuses hadn't blown, the main turbines would have exploded. He said whoever triggered that lockout saved this building. Troy gaped. But she didn't hack you, Troy, Henderson said. She stopped you from committing negligent homicide. Henderson pulled out his phone. He looked at the screen. He looked at the dead factory. And now we have a brick, he said. The IT team says the servers are wiped. The maintenance team says the power is physically severed. You have achieved total darkness. I can fix this, Troy pleaded. I just need more time. I can order new fuses. I can get the contractors back. You need to leave, Henderson said. Sir. Now, Henderson said, before I call the legal department and ask them if I can sue you for the gross domestic product of a small country. Get off my property. Troy slumped. All the buzzwords, all the synergy, all the pivots left his body. He looked at the factory one last time, his conquest, his failure. He walked toward his BMW. He didn't look back. Henderson watched him go. He waited until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Then he turned to Miguel. Can you get the power back on? Henderson asked. I can replace the fuses, sir, Miguel said, crossing his arms. It will take 4 hours. But the system, the brains, it is gone. Troy wiped it. Even if we get power, the machines won't know what to do. They are lobotomized. So, we are dead in the water, Henderson said. Unless, Miguel trailed off. Unless what? Unless you call the architect. Henderson sighed. He rubbed his temples. He knew he had lost. He knew he had to eat crow, a large, feathery, unseasoned crow. He looked at the silent smokestacks. He looked at the line of trucks waiting at the gate. He checked his watch. Do you have his number? Henderson asked. I do, Miguel smiled. My phone rang at 11 in the morning. I saw the caller identification, Gracine Industries. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again at 11:05. Voicemail. At 11:10, a text came through from Henderson. William, name your price. I ate another grape. I watched a boat cross the bay. Then I replied, William, I am retired, but I do consulting. My rate is triple my old salary, and I want a written apology. Not to me, to the machine. The response was immediate. Done. When can you be here? I stood up. I grabbed my keys. I grabbed the old battered leather bag that contained my laptop and the USB drive. William, I am 3 hours away. Don't touch anything. I got in my truck. I didn't rush. I stopped for coffee. I listened to an audiobook. I enjoyed the drive south. The rain cleared up as I crossed the county line, leaving the sky a brilliant, washed-out blue. When I pulled up to the gate, the guard, Kevin, saluted me. Actually saluted. Welcome back, sir, Kevin said. Open the gate, Kevin. Manually. I assume the electronics are fried. Yes, sir. I drove up to the main entrance. Henderson was waiting. He looked humble. That was a new look for him. William, he said, extending a hand. Mr. Henderson, I nodded. I didn't shake his hand. I walked past him straight toward the server room. Let's see how bad he broke my toys. The server room was dark, lit only by the flashlights of the IT team. They looked at me like I was the Messiah returning in a flannel shirt. Boot it up, I said to the IT kid. We can't, he said. The operating system is gone. The drives are blank. The drives you can see are blank, I corrected. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the USB drive, the one I had smuggled out in my pocket right under Troy's nose. The ghost drive. I plugged it into the main console. A tiny green light blinked. Power, I commanded. But the fuses, Miguel said from the doorway. I bypassed the main breaker physically on my way in, I said. We have auxiliary power. Hit the switch. Miguel threw a lever. The fans roared to life. The screens flickered. And then a beautiful thing happened. Reading USB signature found. E. Miller. Decrypting legacy partition. Storing system state pre-Troy. Green bars filled the screens. The code cascaded down like rain. It was messy, it was old. It was spaghetti code, but it was alive. System restoring, the IT kid whispered. It is all coming back. The calibration data, the timing maps, everything. I turned to Henderson. The factory is confused. It had a stroke. It needs to relearn how to walk. That will take me about 2 weeks of babysitting. Whatever you need, Henderson said. Consultant basis, I said. $250 an hour. Minimum 6-month retainer. And I want Troy's office turned into a break room for the floor staff with a good coffee machine. Henderson didn't even blink. Deal. I turned back to the screen. I typed in my password. Welcome back, architect. Okay, I cracked my knuckles. Let's make some cars. Getting the lights back on was the easy part. Convincing the machines to trust us again was the hard part. For the next 3 days, I practically lived on the factory floor. I slept on a canvas cot in the engineering office. I drank terrible coffee that tasted like battery acid, and I loved every minute of it. The modernization project was officially scrapped. The cloud servers were disconnected, their fiber optic cables coiled up and left in a corner like dead snakes. We went back to the local loop. My loop. The factory felt like a patient waking up from a coma. It was groggy. The timing was off. The sensors were jumpy. When I first engaged the main drive for line 1, the conveyor belt lurched forward with a groan that sounded terrifyingly human. It was muscle memory returning slowly. The information technology team, the clean squad, watched me work. At first, they were resentful. I was the old man who had humiliated their boss. But as the hours wore on, resentment turned to curiosity, and curiosity turned to something looking a lot like awe. They watched me walk up to a stamping press that was throwing error codes. They watched me place a hand on the housing, close my eyes, and listen. It is the solenoid, I said. It is sticking on the retract stroke. Replace the valve. They replaced the valve. The error cleared. How did you know that? Kevin, the lead IT kid, asked me on the second night. He was sitting on a crate, holding a laptop that was currently useless because I was tuning the system by ear. The diagnostic screen said the solenoid was fine. I did not know it, I said, wiping grease from my hands. I heard it. A solenoid makes a sharp click. That one was making a thud. It was hitting the stop too hard. But the data said it was within tolerance, Kevin argued. Data is a snapshot, I said. Sound is a story. You are trying to read the book by looking at the page numbers. You have to read the words. He frowned, looking at the massive, silent machinery around us. I realized then that he had never actually looked at the machines. He had only ever looked at the code that controlled them. He saw the factory as an abstraction, a video game to be optimized. He didn't understand that steel expands when it gets hot, that oil gets thinner as it works, that electricity has a hum that changes pitch when the load increases. Wait, Kevin said. He pointed to the robotic arm on line 3. The one Troy had smashed. We had repaired it with spare parts, but it was moving tentatively. You are recalibrating the timing using a MIDI interface. Like for music, I had a keyboard plugged into the diagnostic port. The timing protocol for these old KUKA robots is remarkably similar to a drum machine, I explained. I tapped a key. The robot arm swung left. I tapped another. It swung right. You want them to stay in rhythm. You treat them like a jazz band, not a spreadsheet. He watched the robot move. It wasn't jerky anymore. It was fluid. It was swinging with a natural, heavy grace. Jazz, he whispered. He took notes. He was learning. That was good. Maybe in 10 years he would be a wizard too. By Friday afternoon, the plant was back at 90% capacity. We had missed a few shipments, and the finance department was still hyperventilating, but we were alive. The bleed had stopped. The factory was humming again. It wasn't the erratic, stuttering noise of the last few days. It was the deep, rhythmic thrum I had listened to for 30 years. Mr. Henderson called a town hall meeting on the floor at 3 in the afternoon, right at the shift change. He stood on a wooden shipping crate. It was a humble podium, not a stage. He wasn't wearing his cashmere coat. He was in shirt sleeves and he looked tired. The workers gathered around. Miguel was there, his face smeared with soot but grinning. The operators, the forklift drivers, the maintenance crew. They looked wary. They had seen management pivots before. They expected a speech about shared sacrifice and tightening belts. I want to apologize, Henderson began. His voice echoed in the cavernous space. The crowd shifted. Apologies from the C-suite were as rare as unicorns. I listened to the wrong voice, Henderson said. I thought new meant better. I forgot that experience is the only thing you cannot download. I forgot that this factory is not just assets and liabilities. It is people. He looked at me, standing in the back near the tool crib. William has agreed to stay on as our senior systems architect, Henderson announced. He answers only to me, and effective immediately, we are ending the cloud migration program. We are staying local. There was applause, real applause, not the polite golf clap kind you hear in boardrooms, but the whistling, hooting, boot-stomping kind from guys missing fingernails. Miguel punched the air. Kevin, the IT kid, clapped hesitantly, then with more enthusiasm. Henderson stepped down from the crate. He looked like he wanted to leave, to retreat to the safety of his office and a stiff drink. "One more thing," I said. My voice carried over the dying applause. I stepped forward. The crowd parted for me. I walked up to the crate, but I didn't get on it. I just looked at Henderson. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "you owe someone an apology." "I just apologized to the team," he said, confused. "Not the team," I said. I turned and pointed to line 3, specifically to the Station 5 robot, Lefty. The machine stood silent in its safety cage, gleaming with new hydraulic hoses and a fresh coat of yellow paint on the replacement axis. But you could still see the scars on the base where the metal had twisted. "Her," I said, "the machine. You let a stranger hurt her. You let him override her instincts. You let him force her to hurt herself. Tell her you are sorry." The floor went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Henderson looked at me like I had lost my mind. He looked at the robot. Then he looked at the faces of the workers. He saw something in their eyes. These were men and women who spent more time with these machines than with their spouses. They named them. They talked to them. They knew their moods. To Henderson, it was a piece of capital equipment. To them, it was a partner. He realized I wasn't joking. He realized this wasn't about the machine. It was about the culture. It was about acknowledging that the work had dignity and the tools had value. He walked over to the safety cage. He placed a hand on the cold yellow metal. He looked at the optical sensor array, which looked uncannily like a face. "I am sorry," he mumbled. "Louder," I said. "She has bad hearing." Henderson took a breath. He straightened his back. "I am sorry," he shouted. At that exact moment, the shift change timer triggered. Line 3 hissed. The hydraulic pumps engaged. The robot arm snapped to attention, the welding tip sparking as it ran a self-test. Click, whoosh, spark. It looked like a nod. "Accepted," I said. The tension in the room broke. Someone laughed. Then everyone was laughing, clapping Henderson on the back. It was a weird tribal moment, but it was real. The wound was closed. Later that afternoon, I was in the office. My new office, which was actually my old desk. But Henderson had ordered a much more comfortable chair, and someone had cleaned the coffee stains off the floor. Henderson walked in with the legal team. They looked serious. They were carrying a thick stack of paper. "The new contract," the lead lawyer said, sliding it across the desk. "It is all standard. Triple salary as discussed. The retainer. The consulting fees. Just sign here." I picked up the pen. Then I put it down. "Actually," I said, "there is one small detail we need to address. The intellectual property." The lawyer frowned. "What do you mean?" "The company owns all work product created during employment. That is standard." 12 years ago, I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out a yellowed, coffee-stained piece of paper. "When I built the Ghost operating system for this plant, the company did not want to pay for the software license from Siemens. It was too expensive. So the previous CEO, God rest his cheap soul, asked me to write a custom solution." I slid the paper across the desk. It was a handwritten memorandum of understanding. I pointed to a paragraph at the bottom. "He signed this," I said. "It states that the custom code, the Ghost architecture, remains the intellectual property of the creator, me. It is licensed to Gracine for a fee of $1 per year, as long as I am employed here." The lawyer picked up the paper. His eyes widened behind his glasses. He looked at Henderson. "If my employment is terminated," I continued, leaning back in my new chair, "the license is revoked immediately. Any use of the software becomes copyright infringement." "You mean," Henderson paled, "when Troy fired you, he inadvertently made the entire factory operation illegal," I said. "Technically, for the last 3 days, since I plugged that USB drive back in, you have been pirating my brain." Henderson looked at the lawyer. The lawyer nodded slowly. "It is valid," the lawyer whispered. "It is binding." "What do you want?" Henderson asked. He knew he was beaten. He looked tired. He just wanted to go home. "I do not want to sue you," I said. "I like this place. I want a new clause." "Name it." "The license is permanent," I said, "on one condition. I have veto power over any future operations directors. No one touches my code without my permission ever. If you hire another Troy, I pull the license and the factory goes dark. Permanently." "Don't," Henderson said instantly. "Is that it?" And I want a reserved parking spot next to the door, I added. My knees are not what they used to be. Henderson laughed. It was a nervous laugh, but it was genuine. You got it, William. I signed the contract. The lawyer notarized it. They shook my hand and left. I sat there for a long time. The factory floor rumbled beneath me. It sounded different now. It sounded deeper, richer. Maybe it was my imagination, or maybe it was the new bearings we installed in the main drive. But the place sounded happy. I looked at the screen. The uptime clock was ticking upward. 4 hours, 5 hours, 0 faults. I had won. But more importantly, the logic had won. The idea that you can replace expertise with an algorithm had been defeated, at least for today. I opened the drawer and took out a fresh logbook. I wrote the date at the top of the page. Day 1, I wrote, System Status Jazz. I closed the book. I watched the sun dip below the horizon through the high windows of the plant. The night shift was coming on. The rhythm would change soon, slowing down a fraction for the evening run. I needed to adjust the pressure on press 4. I stood up. My back hurt, but it was a good hurt. It was the hurt of being useful. I walked out onto the gantry. The factory stretched out below me, a canyon of steel and light. I raised my hand like a conductor raising a baton. All right, night crew, I whispered. Let's play. 6 months later, the factory hums. It is a different sound now. It is deeper, richer. Maybe it is my imagination, or maybe it is the new bearings we installed in the main drive, but the place sounds happy. It sounds like a cat purring if the cat weighed 10,000 tons and was made of galvanized steel. Troy landed on his feet, of course. Guys like that always do. Failing upwards is a gravity-defying trick reserved for men with good teeth and expensive suits. I heard through the grapevine that he is now a consultant for digital transformation at a logistics firm in Ohio. I give it 6 months before their delivery trucks start driving into rivers. But that is not my problem. My problem is currently the temperature variance on press 4, and I am happy to report that it is holding steady within 0.5 degrees. I am sitting in the control booth, the crow's nest, overlooking the floor. I have a mug of tea that is actually hot, and a monitor that shows every heartbeat of the plant in glorious, low-resolution green text. Down on the floor, I see a group of college interns wearing bright orange vests. They look terrified. They are staring at the robotic arms of Line 3 like they are watching dinosaurs in a park. Walking in front of them is Kevin. Kevin has grown up. He traded his skinny jeans for work canvas. He has a smear of grease on his cheek that he wears like a badge of honor. He is now officially the system's junior architect. I lean forward and toggle the audio feed so I can hear what he is telling them. Don't trust the auto calibration, Kevin says, pointing his flashlight at a servo motor. He sounds confident. He sounds like me. One of the interns raises a hand, but the dashboard says it is green. The dashboard lies, Kevin says. Listen to the servo. If it whines, it is thirsty. If it clicks, it is angry. Respect the machine. I smile. The kid is all right. He is teaching them the jazz. He is teaching them that you cannot conduct a symphony by looking at the sheet music alone. You have to listen to the room. My phone buzzes on the desk. It is a notification from the bank. The monthly consulting retainer has cleared. It is a ridiculous amount of money. It is more money than I know what to do with. I bought a boat. I do not even like fishing, but I like sitting on things that float. I named it the Legacy. Miguel thinks it is a terrible name. He says it sounds like a funeral home. I told him he is banned from the captain's quarters until he learns to appreciate irony. Miguel waves up at me from the floor. He points to the large digital clock on the wall. It is 3 in the afternoon, shift change. The bell rings. It is a sharp, clear note that cuts through the industrial noise. The first shift streams out, tired and dirty. They walk with the heavy, satisfied gait of men and women who have built something tangible. The second shift streams in, fresh and caffeinated, joking as they punch their cards. It is the tide coming in and going out. It is the respiration of the beast. I look at the main console. The ghost system is running perfectly. Uptime 4,320 hours. Faults 0. I type in a command. Just checking the logs. Status optimal. Architect E. Miller. I could retire for real this time. I could take the money and move to Florida. I could never smell hydraulic fluid again. I could spend my days arguing with seagulls and drinking iced tea. But then I look at line 3. She is moving with that hypnotic rhythm. Thrunk. Whoosh. She is dancing. And I know that if I leave, eventually someone will come along who does not know the steps. Someone who thinks new is always better. Someone who forgets that legacy does not mean old. It means survived. I am not going anywhere. I am the ghost in the machine. And this house is haunted. I lean into the microphone that broadcasts to the entire floor. All right, second shift, I say. My voice booms over the loudspeakers, mingling with the hiss of the pistons. Let's have a good run. Safety first. Do not touch the red buttons unless you mean it. I press the enter key. One sharp click. Execute. Start sequence. The overhead lights brighten. The hum rises to a roar. The factory breathes, and so do I.